Okay, so let's just get right into it. Final Fantasy VII Revelation was finally shown to us on Friday at Summer Games Fest. Hamaguchi came onto the stage, showed the trailer. Matt Mercer came out. They kind of spoke about some of the systems. They showed a lot of the fighting, the way that the system has evolved. Most of all, we got about 2.5 minutes of just straight trailer, which was great. And then Hamaguchi walked off the stage and did about 14 interviews. I don't think he slept for a second all weekend. So we're gonna go over some of the stuff that came out that he talked about in the interviews. We have, I think, 4 interviews we're gonna read. We're gonna do this one quick. So the first interview we have is from Den Feminico Gamer, which is obviously a Japanese publication, so there was a lot of translation that was going on throughout the days. A lot of people were translating it, and some of the translations were coming across weird, wrong, and just like it's hard to translate and then have people like try to figure out what Hamaguchi's actually meaning, because he's trying to be secretive still while answering questions but not giving away too much. So we'll read this one where it's just like kind of like bullet points of what is happening and like what he kind of spoke about with the game, and then we'll go into actual interviews where it says the interviewer asks a question and then it's just straight him answering the question, and it's all like back and forth there. But this is kind of, like I said, Hamaguchi did a lot of interviews over the weekend, so there'll be a lot of stuff that is just repeated, so we'll try to get through that as quick as possible, but I will probably yap a few times, so bear with me and let's read some new stuff about, and not even new stuff, this is the first we're seeing of it, it's just stuff at this point. It's all new knowledge about Revelation. So with world exploration and locations, the Highwind will be available very early in the game. That makes the most sense, you know, like third game, they've spoken about how they want you to be able to fly around and see everything as soon as possible. I feel like available very early in the game. I don't think we start with it. I think the game starts and then we probably go like a chapter or two and then get the Highwind. That would make the most sense to me. Once obtained, players can fly freely around the entire map and explore virtually the entire world. Of course, it's virtually the entire world, not going to let you go anywhere or everywhere. The world map has been significantly expanded compared to Rebirth. That's crazy. That's very crazy. When you truly think about, in my opinion at least, how big Rebirth was. I think my Rebirth total game time at the end of it was like 130 hours. So that's kind of crazy. The developers want players to decide for themselves where to go first, rather than follow a strictly linear path. That kind of worried me a bit, with like, get the Highwind and go wherever you want, because I kind of want to follow like the story path. But that gets cleared up later on when we'll talk more about it. There'll be many locations that players can visit immediately using the Highwind, but some areas may contain enemies that are far too powerful. Yeah, so we got it instantly. You can't just go do whatever you want. You're still gonna have to kind of go on the path that they pretty much set for you due to enemy levels. Of course, we'll see how players take that. The world functions like a globe. Flying far enough in one direction will eventually bring players back to the opposite side of the map. So like old school Final Fantasy games with the airship, you can just go around the whole map. That's cool. Allowing the Highwind to land anywhere would be impossible. Players will deploy from it via parachute when exploring locations. That makes sense. Some people were kind of like upset about that, but just having the Highwind function about how they're saying it's going to function is kind of crazy in its own right. So having it have to land anywhere, I could see them, maybe they created like helipads for the Highwind, and in certain areas you just have to land the Highwind in certain areas. that they could control. But, I mean, being able to go anywhere and just jump off and land in the map is really cool. All regions from Rebirth return, including Gongaga, although many areas will not be identical to the previous versions. Okay, that's interesting. It'll be interesting to go back to older areas and see what that actually means. Midgar will return as a fully explorable area. Well, that makes sense, because obviously you go back to Midgar. But it'll be interesting to see what it's like this time around, and if they will add stuff to Midgar, like certain affiliations in Midgar. Wutai will be fully depicted and expanded compared to the original game. That's kind of the biggest thing so far with how the map is going to work, how the map is going to be. Having Wutai be a massive part of the game. It was a little side area in the OG, but obviously if you've played Rebirth, you know Wutai, the war with Wutai is kind of a big overarching thing in the story. So being able to have it fully depicted and expanded is going to go kind of crazy. When exploring Midgar, players may encounter characters connected to Deep Ground. Okay, so that's not... They don't just say that to say that. There is zero chance we don't see Deep Ground when we go back to Midgar. Whether it be a side quest or if they're part of the actual story when you go back to Midgar. You would not just be like, oh, you might see Deep Ground members. No, you're seeing Deep Ground members. Hamaguchi specifically referenced the possibility of encountering characters such as Whis and Nero when discussing exploration. Exactly, he said that for a reason. Obviously, the remake DLC Intergrade, you see that stuff, so it makes sense that it's gonna be back. Rocket Town is confirmed to appear in Revelation and will be visited later in the story. That's another interesting thing that they chose to do, to keep it out of Part 2 and just leave Rocket Town for all of Part 3, which makes me feel like it's going to be a big part of the story. The team originally considered including Rocket Town and Rebirth before deciding it would be a better fit for Part 3. Yeah, exactly. So instead of just throwing it in to Part 2 for it to be there, they thought it might work better in Part 3, which I agree with. The underwater world from the original FF7 will return in Revelation. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. Like, we're hopping our ass into a submarine and we're gonna go see what goes on. Like, how big is this game gonna be? Then we move into the story and the characters. Players' choices will have a much greater impact than they did in Rebirth. Your decisions can affect progression, unlock different story content, and influence how parts of the narrative unfold. I don't know how that's going to work. Unlock different story content. So if at one point I say no, I don't get story content, instead of saying yes and I get story content, I'm not too sure about that. Hamaguchi does not believe the remake trilogy should end with multiple endings. That's good. As a creator, he prefers a single, definitive conclusion to the story. Thank you. Thank you. The game will feature one ending that Square Enix considers the conclusion of the FF7 remake trilogy. Perfect. However, because Revelation places much more emphasis on player choice and its consequences, different players may experience different events, scenes, and story developments throughout their playthrough. So that's... I don't think it's going to be massive changes. I don't think you're going to see completely different scenes play out, depending if you said yes or no to a question. I think there'll be little dialogue options that you get that are different between characters, but I don't think it's going to be like so severe that my playthrough is so much different than your playthrough. At least I hope not, because then that adds so much more yapping to the people who like to hate things. Side content and certain story experiences will vary depending on player choices. Once again, I don't know how crazy that's going to be. The main story progression itself follows a predetermined order. That's what I want. I was scared early on when they were like, get the high wind and go wherever you want. And I was like, wait, that's a little too much. A little too much choice. But it's nice that the story progression, you're going to have to go to certain areas at certain times to progress the story. This is a big one. Zack will have a much larger role in Revelation than he did in Rebirth and will provide players with a memorable experience. So Zack was featured heavily in Rebirth. Marketing going up, and then he really wasn't in it too much. Very, very interested to see what he's going to do in Revelation. With how Rebirth ended. According to Hamaguchi, Zack's role is to help players understand that the world and circumstances of the remake trilogy are not exactly the same as those in the original FF7. So, yeah, it's kind of Zack is there to be like, hey, first of all, I'm alive, so things are different a little bit, okay? Temporary guest characters will join the party and become playable during certain sections of the game. That is... to say temporary guest characters. So obviously Zack, we would know he's going to be playable again. In my opinion. Who else? Who else? If you've made it this far in the video and you still care about what old Farnsey is talking about, right now, I'm saying it, Genesis. Genesis is going to be playable. Remember this. Bookmark this. A new Japanese voice actor has been selected for Reno. Yes, because unfortunately Reno's Japanese voice actor passed away during Rebirth, and they didn't find it. Now I'm paraphrasing a bit. I'm pretty sure what I read was they didn't want to disrespect him by replacing him halfway through the game and changing and kind of just erasing his Reno. So that's why in Rebirth, Reno really isn't... he doesn't really have any voice lines. You barely hear Reno talk. But they replaced him for this one, so I feel like the Turks are going to be a lot more prevalent. Reno and the Turks will receive significantly more focus and development in Revelation. Yeah, so the Turks will, even though the Turks are a big part of the story, with the unfortunate circumstances of his Japanese voice actor passing away, they kind of were like, we'll respect him, and now they're going to be much, much bigger in Revelation. The Wutai storyline will feature a stronger political dimension. Of course, that makes perfect sense with how Rufus and everyone have been talking. I think the war on Wutai is going to be a big thing. The Turks will also play a role in the Wutai storyline, just like in the OG. Technically, when you went there for the side quest, they were there. New stories will be told about locations and events that were only briefly explored in the original game. That's awesome, and this is where we get into the whole... I fully believe this is the game they wanted to make. PS1 limited them in a lot of ways. So, new stories will be told about locations and events. I feel like you could say that for so many places in the OG and be like, I wish that was like expanded upon. I feel like we're getting it in this game, and that's only going to add to the world of Final Fantasy VII. I love that. The affinity system for Rebirth is being replaced due to the different structures and focus on Revelation story. So instead of just Cloud being like, Barrett will remember that. I think it'll be an expanded version of that where all the characters kind of know stuff. While Rebirth focused primarily on Cloud's relationships with other characters, Revelation will place greater emphasis on developing the cast as a whole. Makes sense. Players who want to learn more about specific characters will have more opportunities to do so. And this is another thing I almost feel bad for Hamaguchi is people loved these characters for years and years and years and made up all this stuff for them. It's their characters. They made all this. And now they're having the option to actually have time and space to further expand these characters. And some people, I feel, might not like what the expanded characters are when you learn more about them, and I don't know, we'll see. I'm not too worried on my side about that. I don't have parasocial relationships with video game characters, but I feel like a lot of people do, and they might be a little mad. Hamaguchi says the game has an ending, and he is personally very proud of it. One that concludes a journey that has lasted more than a decade for both the developers and players. Hell yeah. The theme reflects both Cloud and his companions preparing for the final battle, and the developers' determination to properly conclude the remake trilogy. The central theme for Final Fantasy VII Revelation is resolve. I feel that goes for, like, the devs, the fans, and the game. Like, this was not an easy thing for the dev team to, like, do at all. To be like, we are the people who are remaking maybe one of the biggest JRPGs on the planet. One of the most influential games ever. And we're going to remake it, and we're going to have technology to make it. Like, it's scary. Gameplay and combat. The new fit system allows characters to adopt different combat roles for jobs. Examples include jobs such as Black Mage. Each fit setup comes with its own outfit. Every playable character has 4 fits available. All fits are unlocked from the beginning of the game. Oh, so you can just do whatever you want as soon as the game starts. Each fit has its own progression and skill tree. Okay. So I wonder if each character, if they all have the same fit, like everyone's a Black Mage, everyone's a Warrior, or if each character has their own special ones. Vincent's gameplay allows him to switch between his human form and his beast form at the press of a button without a strict time limit. Oh, so Vincent can just be his beast all the time. That's kind of crazy. Sid specializes in aerial combat. Oh, we did see in the gameplay of Sid, he's up in the air throwing his spear around, spinning it around. Spear comes back to him. He's yelling about the skies are his, and he's right. There are more combination attacks and synergy abilities between party members than before. That's exciting. I'm so excited for this game. Vincent and Sid both have synergy abilities with each other as well as other party members. That's a good thing. They are part of the team now. You would expect that. Players will have a single chocobo companion that can level up throughout the game. That makes sense. So you're not going to do chocobo breeding. You're just going to have one chocobo. And as you level it up or progress it through the game, it will learn all the abilities needed to get to where you need to go. The development team has spent considerable time discussing how to adapt to Knights of the Round. They are currently working on content that lives up to the summon's legendary reputation. So they want to get it right. They want to get Knights of the Round right. And it's probably not easy to do. And they're still working on making the Knights of the Round. When does this game release again? When does this game release? I guess it doesn't have a specific date. It's just spring. It could still be delayed. I mean, I don't know. I think Knights of the Round can be an insane fight, if that's what you want to do. Or if you just want to, like, find them and then you summon them, maybe? I don't know. Now let's go into the biggest problem that people seem to have with Rebirth. The mini-games. The minigames are not being reduced in number. Right off the bat. I don't care. You don't like minigames? Too bad. We're putting more in. Their difficulty is being adjusted so that players who struggle with them in Rebirth can enjoy them more easily. Minigames will feature easy and normal difficulty options. A new option allows players to skip certain minigames. Okay, that might make people happy. Don't want to do it? You don't gotta do it. The famous Tifa vs Scarlet slap fight from the original FF7 will return as a minigame. Of course. These guys, the dev team just get it. They know what they need to do. They know what they need to keep in the game. They know the necessary cuts they have to make that don't make sense, but they can't cut stuff that you need that make FF7 in my opinion. And then finally the final section of this. The game is currently playable from beginning to end, including side content. Development is in its final polishing stage. The team is considering showing the game at Tokyo Game Show, which is in September, which I feel like you do. If you're going to release in early 2027, we've only seen it one time, although I will say we saw a lot of it. Like, they went crazy with this as a first showing. It is, to me, it makes sense. Tokyo Game Show, just like another story trailer. Just show it off again. And then you got the Game Awards in December. Maybe another trailer. Or, yeah, and then you get 3 showings of it, and then one final time before release. So you see it 4 times. I don't know. We'll see. I would be shocked to see it not at Tokyo Game Show, though. The Summer Game Fest 2026 trailer was captured on PlayStation 5 hardware. That makes perfect sense to me because I fully believe in my heart it was only going to come to PS5 at the start. That's my thing I'm sticking with. I think Square Enix went through that restructuring on how they want to do things so they don't go out of business like a lot of the game industry these last few years. And they said, make everything multi-platform. We need to get our games everywhere as possible. I think this game was developed for just PS5 at the start, and then they would port it to other consoles a year later like they did with Remake and Rebirth. And I think that's why we didn't see it for a while. People thought we'd see it 6 months ago. I fully believe that we did not see it because they had to figure out how to get it to work on all consoles. So that year that you would usually get to port it is now just part of your dev time. But it makes sense it was shown on PlayStation 5 because that's probably the most stable build they have. The game is already running on Nintendo Switch 2. Crazy. The team is currently prioritizing polishing the PS5 and PC versions before focusing on additional Switch 2 optimization. Revelation is planned as a multi-platform release. It's not planned, it is confirmed. And this is what I mean with these translations. When you translate, sometimes meaning is lost in translation, and then you get stuff like that. Revelation is planned as a multi-platform release. It's planned, but something could happen. No, it is releasing on everything. They just have to figure out how to make it all work good. I, for one, am so excited to play it day one on the PC. We just might have to do a little updating on the PC to get it as good as possible because I want that bad boy to look 4K, okay? Okay, so now let's go to Game Rant's interview they had with the legend himself, Hamaguchi. This is by Nick Rodriguez. This year's Summer Games Fest was opening night live, concluded with a dazzling reveal of the next Final Fantasy VII Remake project, Revelation. In a recent interview with Game Rant, Final Fantasy VII Revelation director Hamaguchi shed some light on what players can expect from this finale, which is said to be even more ambitious than Rebirth, which even saying that is insane to me, because Rebirth seemed impossible. You know, like everyone was like, what is Rebirth gonna be? And then it ended up being everything that people wanted plus more, and it was like, this is unbelievable that this works. Now here we go. Hamaguchi on ending the Final Fantasy VII Remake project after so long. As we approach the end, what are you hoping will be the legacy of the Final Fantasy VII Remake saga? What sort of impact do you hope it'll have on other remakes? The Final Fantasy VII IP has had a huge impact on the digital entertainment industry. It goes without saying that it's very iconic. For the development team, who has spent the last decade bringing out this reimagined version of Final Fantasy VII, it carries a lot of weight for us. We want fans to bear witness to the ending of this saga, and not regret having followed this series for almost a decade. I hope they enjoy the ride. Brother, I have enjoyed this ride more than probably anything gaming related in the longest time. And even that answer right there, you're going to see throughout the questions. Hamaguchi is very careful with how he speaks, because obviously you don't want to give anything away. I don't think I need to dive into how difficult it was to develop this project in just 10 years. I think everyone in the industry, especially developers, really understand how much of a feat that it is. So as for the FF7 Remake Saga's legacy on the games industry and remakes as a whole, I just hope that it has a strong impact on other developers. I don't think there was a better person in Square Enix to head this adventure, this insane task, than Hamaguchi. I think he's been one of the best. He speaks so freely, and he's just, I think he understands it the most about how much Final Fantasy VII means to a lot of people. Do you think we're going to see more remake projects with the scope and scale of the Final Fantasy VII remakes? Hamaguchi, it's probably going to be very difficult to achieve another remake on a similar scale and scope. For one thing, the IP has to be right. It has to be huge, and Final Fantasy VII filled that role, so to speak. Another thing is that creating a game is not something that can be done by just one person. It's always going to be a team effort. And in that regard, I'm very grateful to have this incredible development team that ran with me for the past decade. It's really been a long group effort, which is something that every development team can't pull off. And yeah, it's true, because a lot of the time, dev people will leave the team, their team will get restructured, they'll pull people off of it. The fact that we're getting these 3 games in, I don't know, about a decade, 3 games in a decade, is just because they stuck with the same team, they knew what they were doing, they stuck with the same engine, and they just powered through it all. Fantastic. To your point about IP, we all know how difficult it is to get the property that captures the huge audience and gets the funding it needs for intensive, ambitious development. Understanding that, is there any temptation to continue the world of Final Fantasy VII Remake now that you're reaching its end? Ooh, interesting. Hamaguchi just, yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 comes out 2029. We're doing it again. Right now, I'm just fully focused on delivering a perfect conclusion to the remake trilogy. That's where my head's at right now. To be completely honest, I really can't think of any ideas I have for another installment in the remake after Revelation. Like, the game's not even out yet. God, leave him alone. I don't think this man sleeps. But can I say that, much like we did with FF7 Remake Intergrade, I would be interested in offering a DLC chapter with additional story content after or within FF7 Revelation. If there's strong support from the fans, that's something we might be considering. Wait, what? So he's pretty much saying, hey, if this game sells like 50 million copies, we'll give you some DLC. That sounds very interesting. Is there anything you can tell more about where Revelation would go as far as DLC? Hamaguchi, I think it's better if I don't mention any specifics of what we have in the storyboard right now, because that would reveal what we probably will and won't include in the base game of Revelation. Right now, we just hope the fans look forward to the story of Revelation and the potential that a DLC might come. Okay, so that pretty much confirms that if this sells and it's reviewed good and received good, that they have DLC already in the mind. So what he's saying is, what's DLC going to be? Advent Children? So Hamaguchi, if he straight up says, well, DLC might be Advent Children, then that's him saying Advent Children is not in base Revelation. So it's such a smart answer to be like, we can't talk about it, because if we do, then you know what's not going to be in Revelation. Revelation will further flesh out various elements from the original FF7, such as the Turks and Wutai. Are there any characters, storylines, or concepts that you particularly enjoyed expanding upon, or that you're especially excited for fans to experience? Dude, these questions are crazy. In Revelation, I would say that Wutai is my personal favorite of the more fleshed out elements. Taking a step back and looking at FF7 Rebirth, you may remember that we included Gongaga, which was not part of the original game. Yeah, that's true. You go to Gongaga and there's about 4 shacks, and then you leave. I felt that this greatly strengthened the game experience of Rebirth. Wutai is going to play a similar role in Revelation. It wasn't in the original, but it's going to be shown in a deeper way in this game. This version of Wutai is going to show a lot more of both the pro-Shinra and anti-Shinra factions of the FF7 world. Cool. That area is going to show a lot of the political themes of the game. I think it will resonate with a lot of FF7 fans around the world. More about the Wutai War, I feel. And that the Wutai War, if you... like, this is where they could go crazy because of Ever Crisis and you learning about the young Sephiroth in all that stuff. with the war and all that. That has happened before, and now it's still going. But I don't know how much Ever Crisis is actually going to matter. Although that being said, there's some crazy Ever Crisis stuff. Either way, I digress. Speaking of Gongaga, I heard you mention that Zack Fair is going to have a bigger role in Revelation. Obviously, we saw more of him in Rebirth as well. As a big fan of Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, I'm curious, how much of an impact, if any, did Crisis Core have on not just Revelation, but the remake saga as a whole? That's Hamaguchi. That's correct. Zack is going to have an even bigger role this time around, not just in the story, but in the terms of the overall game experience for the players as well. This actually doesn't just apply to Crisis Core, but also Dirge of Cerberus. Excuse me? Where's my Dirge of Cerberus remake? The Vincent Valentine spin-off. These spin-off titles have quite a big impact on the remake series as a whole, since the concept of the remakes is to reimagine the entire world of FF7. So in that sense, Revelation is going to have elements that tie into these two games, and even Advent Children. So, Zack and Crisis Core, Deep Ground stuff with Dirge, and Advent Children is just a can of worms that is too much to be like, what's Advent Children to have to do with the trilogy? We'll see. The last question is specifically about you, Hamaguchi-san. I know that you've said that you're fully focused on Revelation right now, but I wonder, now that you've reached the end of this huge, unprecedented project, is there anything you're itching to do next? Do you think there are any more remakes in your future? How about just sleeping for a bit? I don't think Hamaguchi sleeps. I think after this, after it releases, he should just have a nap. Hamaguchi. I don't feel like I'll do another remake series after this, especially not something that this grand in scale. At the same time, I feel that the FF7 remake series was able to show the world the scale and power of the JRPG genre. I think we did a pretty good job of that, so I'm pretty confident in saying that my next project will probably be another JRPG title, and I certainly think we'll be able to leverage the knowledge, experience, and insight that we've gained throughout the decade of developing the FF7 remake series. Whether this new project will be part of the Final Fantasy franchise or a new IP is entirely undecided, but as a Japanese game developer, I'm very proud to deliver this JRPG to global audiences. Put my man in charge of Final Fantasy 17. Except, you gotta think Final Fantasy 17 is already being worked on. Frick it, give him a new IP. Give him a new IP, Square. Who cares? Give him whatever he wants. Back the truck up for him. Give him whatever he wants. GameRant, is there anything else you'd like our readers to know before we wrap up? Hamaguchi. Being able to announce Final Fantasy VII Revelation has been an incredible experience, and I'm very happy to see the strong positive reception from the fans so far. We still have a lot of work left to do before release, but we hope that fans look forward to the spring 2027 release window. Man. They're back in Japan right now. I think Hamaguchi got back in Japan today, which would be June 10th. So they're probably all back, because Summer Games Fest they were probably there for like a week, probably. Good lord. 4 or 5 days to a week. And then they finally got back today. I saw him tweet. Probably right back to the studio. Putting Genesis in the game. Oh, yeah. So that was Game Rant's review. Next, we have an interview from Restart.Run. I've never heard of these people, but they got an interview with Hamaguchi, so this is from Jesse Vitale. Shortly after the announcement of Final Fantasy VII Revelation, Restart.Run had the chance to catch up with director Hamaguchi to learn more about what fans can expect in the finale of the decade-long trilogy. Associate editor Jesse Vitale and news editor Imran Khan. Oh, it's Imran. Okay, I know who Imran is. Talk to Hamaguchi about Sid's new outlook on life, how the team has been able to develop Revelation so fast, and what Chadley has been up to. See, we're getting the real questions now. What has little Chadley been up to? So you've been busy. So you've been busy. Yeah, he has been. How do you feel to finally be able to reveal Revelation? And you revealed it in the 10 minutes of footage and gameplay. Why go that route, as opposed to just a simple trailer and a release date? Why show everybody so much game up front? Oh, the instant questions that, yeah. The intent there was thinking about players who may not have played the series before. You know, that might not be familiar with the franchise, that might have a stronger idea of the world and the characters of Final Fantasy VII, because there are such vivid icons, but we really wanted those who are entering this world and playing it from Revelation and entering the series to have an extended feel of the depth of game experience that we were offering. Yeah, so a lot of the crazy stuff, that'll happen in this story, they didn't show. They didn't show Cloud being all messed up. Every time you saw Cloud, he was happy and cheerful. That's not going to be the case. Cloud is not doing good. So also from a business side, you have to think, we still want people to play our game. If someone goes, oh wow, Final Fantasy VII Revelation, I didn't play the first two, am I going to play this one? I know it sounds crazy, but people do that. So you show this trailer that makes people go, from everywhere, go, wow, that looked crazy. And then the real deep fans, the hardcore fans are like, ooh, yeah, we're in anyways. But it's still a business. So this is something that we really delve into the game design and going into the expansive game experience that one can have. So this is something that we really have focused on for Revelation. What was the key to getting 3 games out in roughly 10 years? That's way faster than the industry average. Games these days tend to take 5 to 6 to 7 years. Rebirth was only a few years ago, and we're already now looking at Revelation coming in spring. Hamaguchi. That's definitely true, and I think that we're also trying to answer the fans' desires to have the next title come to them as soon as possible, and really enter the game and continue with the journey. See, he's the GOAT. But I think in terms of development, when we were working towards the end of Remake, we already had an idea of how to develop Rebirth, and then so on from Rebirth. Toward the end of development of Rebirth, we kind of had an idea of how to approach Revelation. So in that sense, I think also having kind of a constant alignment within the staff. So the same staff, or most of the staff, also worked on Revelation from Rebirth as well. So we were able to maintain the same type of flow, and I think that really helped development. Exactly. So there were reports that Revelation was being worked on while Rebirth wasn't even out yet. So that would make sense to me. Not obviously like full steam ahead on part 3 while Rebirth was still being worked on, but assets can be used, assets can be reused, because like I said, oh, we can go back to places that were in Rebirth. So you throw that into Revelation. There, you got that area there, mess around with it, make it look nicer. So on and so forth. You're not rebuilding a whole game from the ground up. Is I think what helped a lot, and what he says here, keeping the team together helps. Do you have any regrets about the trilogy being 3 separate games, or do you think it was a successful experiment? We'd love for players to see and decide it for themselves once Revelation comes out and the trilogy is complete, but I think that it was a great idea to split this into 3 parts. I agree. It allowed them to really do what they wanted to do. 4 parts would have been crazy. I think they would have failed to a certain degree. But 3 parts, just like 3 discs, I think it's fine. You kind of can really flesh out the world that you want to create. When it comes to the weapons, which we saw pretty prominently at the show, there have been a few different iterations of them over the years, mainly in 7, but also in 14 a little bit. What was the inspiration, and what was your approach to designing them? Something that we discussed regarding the weapon system, of course, kind of dealing with the sheer size of the scale of the weapons, and like, we handle that, right? And so we could have taken the approach of turning it into a weapons minigame, or just making it a thing of its own, potentially. But if we took this route, then perhaps the materia, or the fits that player collected at this point, would be meaningless. And so in that sense, we wanted to build upon the existing combat system, and use that as a foundation. Yet it includes new elements that make fighting the weapons very exciting, And so in that way, we wanted to keep the current foundation of the combat, the battle mechanism, and build upon that. So to me, that means you will fight the weapons to a certain degree, but I think there will still be like mini games, like we saw in the trailer, you pointing all the lasers and then blasting him. Maybe that lowers him down to where you then can fight them, because they're so massive it's going to be tough to like work that out, but I mean, we'll see soon enough. Will some of these new mechanics be familiar to fans of the original, or are these entirely new ideas? Some are completely new. Something that we showed in the trailer was a gun handling gimmick, so that's a new element, and each weapon battle will have new mechanics. Yeah, okay. You mentioned the new fit system. Are those new costumes designed by Nomura? There are many fit designs that are being introduced. They've been designed by one of our character designers, and then Nomura has reviewed them. That's got to be stressful. You create a design for a character, Nomura's children, and you have to be like, do you like this? And he just throws it in the trash. We were talking about the split of the trilogy before that. The first game was Midgar, second game was through the Temple of the Ancients, and Revelation has to be the remaining game, which is discs 2 and 3. Why did it end up so lopsided? Disc 3 wasn't really a thing. Like, people forget. That's a weird question, because like they should probably know that disc 3 of the OG was like nothing. It was the ending FMV. Obviously there was a little bit more, but it really wasn't anything. Now, Hamaguchi, we wanted to include all of this content in the third title, but it's more so like they knew that with the second title they wanted to make it up to the Temple of the Ancients, and that was for sure, and everything else that comes after that would go into the third title. When you were on Maximilian Dude's stream, and he asked you about why you called it Revelation, you had mentioned that a few other names are floating around. Are you allowed to say what those names might have been? Hamaguchi, I do want to reveal them in the future, but for now, I do want us to continue the fanfare and excitement towards Revelation that we just announced. But I do. I would hope to talk about them. Oh, so they don't... See, that's another smart thing. There's no reason to be like, we had 3 different titles when you announce your title. Because then people, you kind of steer the conversation away from Revelation and the game reveal into the people being like, well, I would have liked the second one better. I would have liked this name better. This none makes more sense. So it'll be interesting to hear him after the game comes out and you get the themes and why they wanted to call it Revelation. To then be like, we were going to call it this or we were going to call it this, but that's why we stuck with Revelation. And then you don't move the chatter away from, well, I would have liked it better if it was this. You kind of just, this is what you get. You play the game. We'll talk about it later. Are we going to get to fight Knights of the Round this game? With Knights of the Round and also the weapons that were not mandatory battles within the original game, but were very beloved within the world, we really wanted to stick true to it, and also keep including those beloved elements in this game as well. And so for Knights of the Round, I hope people will be excited about how it will be portrayed. Okay. I'm in. How do you choose which elements in Revelation to expand upon? Is something like Wutai going to be much larger in this game? I do think the Final Fantasy VII series in itself is very grounded. Its core is the story, right? I think it's very important, and I think in that sense or scenario, writer Nojima-san determined that overall structure of how the story will go about. And then I think that from there we take that and how we can expand upon the game experience based on that scenario. And so I think that Nojima-san came up with a very wonderful scenario, and that made it very easy to continue thinking about that. This is what I mean with Hamaguchi. He kind of dances around a question a lot because he doesn't want to give out too much. The game is still, we've just seen it for the first time. You can't just go into interviews and be like, this is why. With Wutai as well in the original game, it's not mandatory to go. It's not part of the main story. However, we wanted to take the approach of being able to expand upon the different character stories, for example with Gongaga and being able to know more about Tifa. In this sense, we took the approach within the remake series, and I think that leads to an expansion of the gaming experience. Yeah, of course. Speaking of changes from the original, Final Fantasy VII, in the original game, Cid was a very abrasive character, but in Rebirth, he is downright pleasant. Is that a thing that is changing for Revelation? Is he going to become more like the original Cid? Or is this just a new kind of Cid, a new take on him? In Revelation, I wouldn't say Cid is necessarily a mean-spirited character per se. I think he's a straight shooter. He says what he thinks and feels, but I think he also has very much of a warmth as a human being. And this time around, there's also a focus on Cid with Rocket Town that players can experience. So in that way, I really hope that more people can see more of Cid and grow to like him more. Yeah, I think there's a giant misconception with like OG Cid. Because of that one scene where you like sit down and drink your goddamn tea. Like, there's a part in OG where one of Cid's workers literally talk about how nice he is. And how he has like a great heart. He has a warmth to him. So it's cool that Hamaguchi actually used that term, because that's in the OG, that's how they refer to him. But I do like how they say, and this time around there's also a focus on Cid with Rocket Town. So when we go to Rocket Town, it's going to be Cid focused. Obviously, you played the OG, you know why. Very interested to see how that plays out. There's only one question left that we could ask, and that is, there's a suspicious lack of Chadley in the Revelation gameplay. Where is my boy? Is he okay? What's going on with Chadley? No one has ever asked that, but you know what? Chadley fans unite. So Chadley, right at the beginning of Revelation, we have the black materia activated, and now there are weapons all over, and that is causing chaos. So Chadley actually has a base that he builds inside of it, and then he is conducting research on Meteor. He does have a very important part that's related to the main story. What? The black materia is activated. So at the beginning of Revelation, obviously, Northern Crater, you gotta think? Boom, black materia is activated. Meteor in the sky. That is causing chaos, and so Chadley actually has a base that he builds inside of it. Built inside of what? And then he is conducting research on Meteor. That makes it sound like Chadley builds a base inside of the Meteor that is coming down. And then he conducts research on Meteor. Does he build a base inside of the Highwind? And this is just a weird translation? Hamaguchi, why are you saying Chadley builds a base inside of it? Chadley's in the Meteor. Just got his big goggles on. It's bright as hell. Cloud, come back and do some battle intel. Shut the hell up, Chadley. That was a good interview. I like that. And then for the final interview I found... This is from Hayes Madsen over on RPG site. I'm also realizing there's a lot of typos in this stuff. I'm just glossing over them, but a lot of these interviews, there's typos in them. Cid and Vincent. Let's get right back into it. RPG site. Back in 2023, Nomura said in an interview that the Final Fantasy VII Remake project will link to Advent Children. Is that still the case, and will players know how that happens when Revelation comes out? What the hell kind of first question is that? Hamaguchi, I don't believe we've publicly claimed or stated it's going to be exactly that, so I'd like for players to play Revelation and see for themselves what the conclusion of the journey holds, and see about that. Okay, so I feel like that's confirmation that it's going into Advent Children somehow. Some point, somewhere, Advent Children will be like... very apparently Advent Children. I wanted to ask about the new job style system. When did the idea come around? Like, did you envision it all when you were developing Rebirth and doing combat improvements? Did you know you'd want to implement this later on? I think Battle Director Endo-san and I were aligned in this, thinking that taking away something from the existing combat system wouldn't fare well with our players, who've really come to love the combat system. We thought more so that adding on and kind of evolving what we've built as foundation would be better for this direction, and would make for a much more fun experience for players for this title. So in this way, the players can choose, oh, we want to take Cloud, who's having more like an attack character, and make him Black Mage Cloud, that's an attacker. Having that ability to customize, we thought would be in the direction. Black Mage Cloud goes crazy. On that note, I'm curious about the costume changes. Final Fantasy VII characters all have very iconic, well-known looks. Why did you decide you wanted to give them costume changes, and do these apply across everything in the game, such as cutscenes? I think it's totally true that their iconic looks with the characters of Final Fantasy VII, and yes, the fits, as we call them, are reflected in cutscenes. I try to think of it like how the battle experience that players may desire in controlling the characters, and then the actual kind of visuals that can differ. That's tough. That's a tough one for me. Them looking silly in cutscenes might be a little tough for them, but I guess they don't look silly. And in that way, the fits we wanted to be able to be customized where players can choose the fits, but the skins are also a different element you can choose. So for example, you might want Black Mage Cloud, but in his original outfit he usually wears. In that way, the skin options can be accumulated in the game, so players can choose their favorite look and style. Okay, there you go. So you can make him Black Mage Cloud, but still have his OG look. Good. Everyone asks about Wutai and Rocket Town, but I want to know if we're going to Bone Village. Bone Village itself is not included, but Northwood and the Temple of Ancients we'll be able to revisit. You know, I saw people complaining about this. Where's Bone Village? Where's Bone Village? Who cares about Bone Village? Who cares about Bone Village? Cloud gotta grab a shovel and start digging in Bone Village. Oh no. Oh, I missed that. Not? Stop talking about Bone Village. It doesn't matter. I want to ask about Vincent, as his backstory is only vaguely hinted at in the original Final Fantasy VII, and then explored in more depth in the likes of Dirge of Cerberus. I know you've already said deep ground characters will be returning. Are Vincent's backstory elements, like in Dirge of Cerberus, something we're going to see in Revelation? I would assume so. That would make the most sense. Of course we're going to see that. We can't delve too much into the storyline just yet, but thinking of spin-offs you mentioned, like Dirge, our overall concept for Revelation is to pick up from those stories as well. So with characters like Vincent and Zack, those are explored. We can't say how much yet, but yeah, exactly. Of course. Of course. We saw Vincent and Sid having a lot of synergy abilities together in the trailer, and you already have this huge cast of characters with a bunch of synergy abilities together. How did you decide how to integrate Vincent and Sid into that part, and who they interact with? This is the same for the fits too, but with synergy we didn't really design it in a sense where some attacks are better with these two characters than others. We really wanted to be able to choose freely what they like and have that be equally available for their choosing. Hamaguchi? What the hell does that mean? So in that sense, yes, Sid and Vincent are joining the slew of characters and those synergy abilities and such. You know, from the creator side, that's kind of a challenge for us to make an improvement on. One of the things you've mentioned in other interviews is that the Turks will have a much larger role. At the end of Rebirth, we see some fairly huge revelations for Rufus Shinra's character. Is he part of that? Will he have a much larger role? I feel like Rufus is kind of with the Wutai War and stuff, Rufus gotta be front and center. In terms of whether Rufus will be directly involved and how much of it will be with the Turks about the storyline, we want players to experience that themselves. Of course, like, you're not going to tell the story before the game's out, but there will be revelations on what the relationship is between Rufus and Glenn, and ties to other spin-off works. Okay. Take back what I said 20 minutes ago. Ever Crisis might have a big thing. Ever Crisis might matter. It'll also be a, revelation. Haha. So players will be able to have a better understanding of the world and the stories of these characters. Everything's going to be a revelation. You're going to see what this trilogy is actually about. The revelation of the fanbase. In the trailer we see a very brief shot of Ruby Weapon, and you've confirmed that the underwater area. In the original game, Ruby and Emerald Weapon have specific gimmicks, like the time limit. Is that an element you've thought about carrying over? Will Ruby and Emerald have these unique gimmicks? For the specific battle logic of Ruby Weapon, and how much of it is an actual homage to the original game, we'd love players to see themselves. Yeah, exactly. But I will say that the players will be kind of engaging with the whole world map. That's going to be a part of the battle with Ruby Weapon. And in terms of the battle design, we could have made it into something more like a minigame specific to the weapons, but we wanted to go in the direction more so of taking the foundational battle-like elements and then adding unique mechanics. So yes, in that sense, players can enjoy that. I almost wonder if you're gonna have to like go around the area and maybe knock out parts of Ruby Weapon, and then he like wakes up out of the sand and then you fight him. With Revelation, you now have this big seamless world with the Highwind. What lessons did you specifically take from creating Rebirth into this new open world? What did you learn from the process of crafting Rebirth? It's not so much that there was something we couldn't do in Rebirth that we can do now or tried to do in Revelation, but more so like we can expand upon the experience that we built in Rebirth. I think in Rebirth, we really covered the open world exploration of that experience, but in order to widen that and make it even more expansive, we thought about the exploration of not just horizontal but vertical and aerial space. So there's more varied modes of transportation exploring the map, just parachuting down, and as you raise a chocobo, there's even more ways and places you can explore with the chocobo. Oh, cool. So your chocobo is going to be able to take you to other areas of the map that you wouldn't be able to get to any other way. In that way, we really scaled up on the degree and scale of exploration that can be done from Rebirth, and I think it's something that can be a pleasant, really exciting surprise. When I was creating this scenery, I actually could see different scenery with the flying chocobo, and it was amazing. Okay. Two of the biggest pieces of information I've seen so far is that you now have story choices that alter the way the story plays out, and Zack having a larger role. But we also now have these different timelines introduced in Rebirth. Are there any story choices going to interact with the idea of different timelines in any way? Okay. So first of all, the end of the journey and the conclusion that Cloud and the companions reach within the remake series, that is something we've conceived that's not going to be altered by player choices. That being said, the sort of conclusions that is going to be reached is not going to be altered, and we mentioned that the main theme of this title is resolve, so this is more tied to the resolve that each character has in their heart going into the final battle. And some of the choices that we make may alter what the player perceives about each character, or understands about each character as they go into the final battle. Like, I'm so interested to play the game to see what he means by that. So maybe my team talks to me differently before going into the final battle. Those are not so much related to the core storyline, but it's more about what we see and what we experience about the characters. I need this game now. As you know, Final Fantasy VII has these... Oh, wait. Now that we're close to the end, after all these years, I'm curious. When the game comes out and people have played the whole trilogy, what sort of legacy you're hoping it has? What kind of feeling are you hoping players have? As you know, Final Fantasy VII has these iconic and such beloved characters, and fans may be wondering the fate of certain characters within this story. But I truly wanted to make a game where, upon playing through the story, they would just feel glad to have been on this journey with these characters. Just have that feeling. Hamaguchi, you know I have that feeling. There's gonna be haters out there. There's gonna be haters that hate this. But just know that the people who are enjoying it immensely. And truly do appreciate. I wish I could talk to him. I wish I could talk to Hamaguchi. I wish I could shake that man's hand. I'm gonna fly back to Japan and just knock on the Square Enix building's door. And be like, Hamaguchi, please, please. I just want to let you know how much I care about this. I'm not crazy, I swear. I'm not crazy. Okay, well, honestly, that is the... Pretty much, I probably missed a few interviews here and there, but most of the interviews you could read. I think there's 2 more that he did. Maybe 3 that I may have missed and forgot about, but if you made it this far, listening to me rant, you pretty much got the gist of everything. We even like went over some of the same questions, just different wording. We're still so early on in this revelation cycle of news that the fact that we got this much already is crazy. There's going to be more leading up to release, so if you'd enjoyed me yapping about it, I hope to see you next time when I'm yapping about it as well. I do a lot of yapping about video games, so I would assume the next big news cycle, Hamaguchi's home now. He's back working on the game, so he's not going to be doing interviews. There probably won't be a lot more interviews until next time we see the game. And even then, maybe he won't do more interview stuff. We'll just see the game. They'll talk about it a bit, and then we'll just be able to yap about it as much as possible. I think the next trailer we see will be at Tokyo Game Show in September, and I cannot wait to see it. And we will delve deep into the trailer over here, and I hope to see you all here as well when we do get more info about Final Fantasy VII Revelation. I, for one, am so excited for this. I'd love to hear what you all think as well. So, I will see you all next time.